Thank you so much, Pitson. For those who are visiting with us, we've been looking at the book of Job, and today we'll be concluding that particular book. And as we do so, I want to thank those of you who are 45 plus. This month and a bit of last month, you've been assisting with the Sunday school ministry. We thank you for so much, and ushering. On the 7th of December, we were to go to Kayole to our home, but because we have the SGM on that day, we shall not be able to do so. We shall be updated on when we shall do that. Also keep praying for those who are single. We have a retreat for them. About 42 young people are out there. Just keep them in prayer that the Lord may continue to minister to them. We're going to read Job chapter 42 from verse 1 to 7. I'll ask Pastor Ngare to take this mic so that he can lead you as you all read. Let us stand up as we read together. Just read from there, Pastor Ngare, because I can't see the screen. Yes, then.
So, and we can read together. Then Job replied to the Lord, I know that you can do all things. No purpose of yours can be thwarted. You asked, who is this that obscures my plans without knowledge? Surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. You said, listen now, and I will speak. I will question you, and you shall answer me. My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. After the Lord had said these things to Job, he said to Eliphaz and the Temanite, I am angry with you and your two friends, because you have not spoken the truth about me, as my servant Job has.
Amen.
Job, 42, 1 to 6.
Amen. Thank you. Please take your seats. Thank you so much for that. I'll request for a few more minutes after 12:30, and I do understand some of you have to leave at 12:30, but in case you're able to stay, I'll take a little more time than 12:30. So please bear with me as I take us through this book. You know, there is no literature that I know of that addresses this question of suffering with the intellectual, with the philosophical integrity and depths, and with the emotional and dramatic realism and spiritual wisdom like the book of Job. It consists of this dialogue between Satan and God, Job and his friends, and then finally a climatic dialogue between God and Job. But before the dialogue, we're introduced to the person of Job. And so from this book, I believe we can learn about, or we can be advised about suffering, for some of us in advance, because we've probably never suffered. But for those of you who are suffering, you would understand how to handle suffering. Because the Bible is very realistic. It says in this world, in this fallen world, you will have trouble. And so suffering is part of this fallen world. And sometimes people who don't expect to have trouble, when they get trouble, the problem is usually the expectation that they usually have of not having trouble at all. In a sense, they are not realistic. Suffering, when it comes, it sometimes can shake us and shake our identity. It can drain our strength, our stability. It can even mess our relationships. It can rattle our very being and even cloud who we are in many ways and undermine our security. Just this week, I was going to visit my parents, and then my wife calls me to say that her mom's younger sister had just passed away, and she had been sick for a short while. And they're burying her on Tuesday in Embu, a very wonderful woman. And I was just thinking through what she had gone through. Even the leaders of this church, just this month or last month, the chairman of our elders court buried his dad after he had gone through a period of sickness and suffering. And so this book begins by giving us a profile of Job from chapter 1, verse 1 to 5. I don't know how people introduce you. Most of the time I see people introducing, at least for me, they begin by my profession, what I do, and then they say all the nice things I've done, and even maybe schools. I've gone to even nursery school sometimes. But for this man, his introduction begins by he feared God. And that fear of God is said by he shuns evil. You see, the two go together. If you fear God, it means you need to shun evil. It's not about a philosophical or abstract thing about fearing God, but it's about an action thing where evil is shunned because you fear God. But look at it. The second thing about him is he values his family. There is a sense in which even though he's busy, he's a wealthy man, he's doing well, his family takes a very key role in his life. And then we are told, of course, the assets he had, he was a wealthy man. But we're also told of how he jealously guarded the name of God. Whenever his children had a party, he would go and sacrifice so that the name of God is not defiled. I find this profile very impressive, and one of those that I would really like to aspire to be like this man. Then we're introduced to Satan speaking to God about Job. You know, Satan is cynical about love. He tells God that Job loves you for the things that you give him, not that he loves you as God. He says, does Job fear God for nothing? Satan tells God, yeah, Job serves me out of love. Satan says, no, it is the prosperity. It is the help. It is the wealth. It is the status. It is the things that he is getting out of you. He does not love you for yourself alone. And if you take any of these things away, he will be out of here. Basically, he's speaking about three things at the same time. One is saying you people are in a convoluted relationship. Job only serves you because of the things you get. But then he's also telling God, God, you are not really God because you don't know that Job is playing you. Or he's saying, if you know that God is playing you, then you're playing with him because you need to be worshipped as well by Job. So he's saying, if you need to be worshipped, then you're not God because God is self-sufficient. He does not need anyone even to worship him for him to be God. So you see, he's saying, you people are using each other. But let's give Satan his due. Because this is one of the biggest human problems. Have you ever been in either a relationship or a friendship and you thought this friendship was just about the two of you or the three of you or whoever it is, and these people valued you for who you are, until you realize that that relationship was only valuable to the extent that you open doors for the other person. You are being networked. And the moment you're not able to open those doors, or the attempt to open those doors is gone, you're out of this place. The people are out of that place. They did not love you for yourself, or they did not value you for yourself, but it was for what you can do. I find a lot of, especially ladies, going through this, where you get into a relationship with a man, but that man's main agenda was sex. And he uses you as an object. But if he realizes that you're not going to give in to him, he walks away. Because you are an object. And I can give you an example in the Bible. In 2 Samuel chapter 13, there's a man, he's David's son, he's called Amnon. He calls his stepsister Tamar to his house. And then he wants, his main idea is to have sex with her. And then he rapes her. And we are told that after that, he hated her even more. Because his objective was not a relationship. It was not to value her for who she is, but it was to fulfill his own desire. And that, you see, is what God is telling that Job is doing. Because you see, what happens about this thing about dehumanizing people, and you can look at many African leaders, especially, who have exploited their people, how they just get becoming harder and harder. Because when you dehumanize another person, you also begin to dehumanize yourself. I don't know whether you've noticed that. And some of you have very nice maids. You tell your children, please don't go and wash dishes, the maid will wash. What you're doing is, you're training someone else and paying them, and not training your children and not paying them. You're dehumanizing yourself over time and your family. So when the maid is no longer there, your children know nothing, and they can't even survive in the world. Does that make sense? So it is a process that you can actually, a process where you begin to dehumanize yourself. You manipulate people, you exploit them, you become harder and cynical, bit by bit. And God does not want us to get to that stage. And so Satan telling God that Job is in a transactional relationship with him. Because if you do that to him, he loves you for himself and is using you. He does not love God. I don't know how your state is today. Do you love God? Or do you love the things he's giving you and has been giving you? So Satan, God having given permission to Satan directly generates theft, murder, and destruction of Job's estate and family. Because the Bible tells us that Satan comes to steal, to kill, and to destroy. He's not just satisfied with killing, but to destroy. Because you see, for him, when he disobeyed God, that is his destination, to destroy. And that is why God told Adam, do not disobey me. Because if you disobey me, all this dominion I've given you, one who will take it from you, and if you obey that person, then you will be subject to theft, to murder, and to death. He generates these things. Job's property is stolen. Some of his servants are killed, and so on and so forth. God hates evil. He does not like people suffering, but he permits it because he's sovereign. But he only permits it to the degree that Satan's intention for you are destroyed and that you are made even greater. God is completely in control. But you and I unleashed the forces of evil when we sinned against God. And so Satan is called the God of his age. And so we are subjected to theft, to murder, and to death. But God, because he's sovereign, he steps in. He tells Satan, you can go this far, but no farther. You can do this to Job, but no more. He's overruling Satan. Yes, he permits it because we are fallen, but he limits it. He's in total charge. That feels very nice in this fallen world. But why does God allow Satan to accomplish the things or to make people suffer? It is because he ends up accomplishing God's purpose. The result of Job's life has encouraged millions and millions of people. Whereas Satan wanted to discredit Job, God has used Job to encourage thousands of people who are going through suffering and to give us lessons to prepare us for suffering at any time. So Job loses things, and then he says these things are not as important as God. He clings to God. We are told in verse 20 of chapter 1, at this Job got up and tore his robe and shaved his head, and he fell down to the ground and worshipped. Job starts off by saying, naked I came. Yes, Job values these things. He values the properties he had, but not to the extent that he builds his life on them. Things essentially don't make Job who he is. What enables Job to stand firm is this theology of grace. He does not say, these things you have taken from me, I worked for them. I worked hard for them. How dare you take them away from me? But he says they were not mine. He says I came naked. I came vulnerable. I was helpless. And everything I have is a loan from God. And everything that I have is from God, and they are gifts of grace. You give, you own them, and you can take them. That is what Job says. And so, my brothers and sisters, it's absolutely important for us as we walk in this world to set light on things. Because we are simply stewards. And when the owner wants them, we need to know that. But if you build your life and happiness on your things, when suffering comes, it will pull you away from the foundation of your heart, of your life, of your happiness. Because that is what suffering does. It takes away something that is important from you. It could be health. It could be a child who is not obeying you as they should. And if that is the case, what suffering will do is that it will make you sadder and sadder. It will make you madder and madder. I'm not sure there is such a language, but please just accept it. And it will make you worse and worse. Worse. Yes. But if, like Job, you build your life on God, if you like your position, if you like your health and your name, but the ultimate status is God's love, what suffering does is it serves to drive you deeper and deeper into the source of your joy, which is God. And this is how Job defeated Satan. You know, early this year, the leadership had said we need to give more focus and attention to our community life groups, the CLGs. And our other experienced pastors were church planting, and the only other pastor who could do that and was the most senior at that particular time in terms of one of our pastors here was Pastor Martin. So we told him, you have to carry this because it's a huge responsibility you have. And the CLG leaders had also said they wanted a pastor for themselves. And so in the month of January, Pastor Martin was given that responsibility and he began to run with it. And he was gathering data to find out who is in which CLG and what are their contacts and so on. And then in February somewhere, he went to service his car somewhere in Langata. He had carried his computer so that he'd be working on those details as his car is serviced. And of course, he had carried money to pay for the service. And then he took a walk with his computer and everything, and two men on a motorbike stopped as if they want to ask for direction. Before Pastor Martin knew what was happening, they removed a gun. And they told him, get on this motorcycle. Before he knew it, they were in some forest in Kibera. I think what worried Pastor Martin more is they started smoking bangi, or for those of you who are English, marijuana. I'm told it's not really an English word. It's somehow a Kikuyu word. You've been to weddings where they say, marijuana kitambo. You've heard that one. So when they started smoking, Pastor Martin knew his life is in danger because you don't want to deal with people who are smoking bangi. You know? And so when they asked for Pastor Martin's phone and computer, he gave them very quickly. And he even gave them the card. So one of them would go to the ATM and withdraw as much money as possible and so on. So they held him there for a while. After a while, God was gracious. He released Pastor Martin. Pastor Martin was very traumatized. And for quite a long time, maybe 1.5 months or 2 months, he had no phone, he had no computer, and yet he's supposed to be getting data and helping the CLGs. And for the rest of us who tried to encourage Pastor Martin, we were wondering, why would God allow a lovely, handsome pastor like Pastor Martin to go through that? To be so traumatized. And CLGs are so key, you know? But we felt one of the things that Satan really wanted was to traumatize Pastor Martin because CLGs meet in the evening. And we felt that one of the things he wanted was Pastor Martin not to move around at night, but also to lose all his data and to lose his instruments of communication. But somehow, he reached a place, he just felt, this is not the way I'm going to live my life. And together with the deacons who work in this ministry, and at that particular time, Pastor Martin has no administrative assistant, he has nothing. He began to develop volunteers. And among the key volunteers was Kalin. And she would come here, and from 8, she's a mother of 2, she's very busy, but she would give her time to volunteer. I want us to stand up. Just stand up a bit. Thank you for the work. She's been able to help Pastor Martin from that time to support him. Thank you so much for that. And since in 6 months, 246 people have been incorporated in CLGs. 17 new CLGs have been formed in a period of 6 months. What Satan had planned to discourage Pastor Martin, God had a different plan. Now, just look at the current CLGs. Just this year alone, from the information we have, we've had about 70 people who've lost their loved ones, and in a few cases, direct CLG members. The people who've been there for those people, pastoring those people, have been their fellow CLG members. There have been hundreds of people who've been sick, and the people who've been supporting those people have been CLG members. These people the CLGs have been having Bible studies, they've been discussing, helping one another, discipling one another. So you can imagine what these new 17 CLGs will do, not only for this place, but for the world. That was what Satan had planned to cause fear in Pastor Martin. But God had a totally different plan. I don't know what you're going through, but God has a plan, even through your suffering, even through what looks like something that is really crazy from Satan. Let me speak about Pitson. You know, when Pastor Martin had to leave the services, another lady who was also helping him with Pitson was Liz. And Liz had to go and take over the communication department because the communication lady who was helping us with communication had to go out of the country. And she was not going to come back soon. So Pitson was left all alone with Kaka, somewhere in the sound room, somewhere there. But guess what happened? We were so afraid that Pitson is alone. How will it happen? How will he work? But Worse still, Pitson got some disease over his throat where he had to go for surgery. And we were like, Satan is having his way here. Some of his leaders, like Njoki, they got the same thing. I don't know what they call it in medical terms, but it seems to affect those who sing. Our youth leader was the same. But what began to happen is God began to raise leaders, volunteers. People like Monica, who is our deacon for ushering, together with her team, have risen to another level that we would never have known. This worship team that you see here, many of you may not have noticed, but if you did, you notice almost each and every one of them led a song. And even those who didn't, like Lulu and Cynthia, they were up on the screen. Essentially, God is raising a team of where every one of them can chase 100 million or 100,000. Whereas if Pitson maybe was just okay and there was no change, he would be the one doing everything. You can see he's only reduced to leading service. Because what Satan had intended and planned for Pitson even going into surgery was to raise his kingdom. Praise the Lord. Job and his friends speak. I'll go very fast on this one. You know, when something's bad happened to people, there are basic ways people respond. Mainly Christians or even and religious people. They tend to think that suffering is as a result of some failure. So they say, which area did I fail? Actually, the book of Job shows us that our suffering is not necessarily as a result of any failure. Then, for the secular people, they look at it from a level of cynicism, where they say, see, there's suffering. This world is just random. There's no one in charge. There's no God in charge. And in any case, if he's there and he allows evil, let's get away from him. But in the case of Job, he goes to God in prayer. He says some very difficult things. He says, curse the day I was born. Curse that woman who said I've been born. He says some very difficult things about his life. But all he's doing is he's expressing them in prayer. Someone says that all these prayers of lamentation in the scriptures, be it Psalms 88 or 39, is a witness to the understanding, a witness to God who understands. God understands how people speak when they are desperate. The very fact that God put them in the Bible tells us a lot about God. He identifies with our desperation. He's not threatened by it. He's saying, I'm God, even though you may not be getting everything right. And so when we are suffering, the best place to go to is to God. And you can tell him anything and everything. So he comes to Job, and one of the things he does is he never gives Job answers to why Job is suffering or to why Job is having this trouble. So he never explains to Job. Instead, he asks Job, who is this who obscures my plans with words without knowledge? Who do you think you are, Job? I am God and I'm in charge. And I don't have to tell you why you're suffering. So you and I have to learn to be in that space where we can suffer without any explanation. Let me give you an example. Let's say Pitson brings milk out of his own volition to my house every day. I wish he could do that. And then someday, he stops bringing. And then he comes and tells me my cow is having a problem. Probably in another 1 week or 2 weeks, I'll sort it out. Guess what? I'll continue to be Pitson's friend because I know in another 2 weeks, there's a reason why he's not bringing the milk. In another 2 weeks, it will start. So my relationship with Pitson will be milk and not Pitson himself. And if God were to explain to you every reason why you're going through suffering, your relationship with God would be what he gives you. And so God takes Job through a position where Job has no idea why he's suffering. He never finds out why. You see, if you want to be a real human being, you need to love God for who he is and love his people for who they are. That is the only way for God to allow Job to be a real person, to make him suffer and even not know why. And so the only way you and I can be sure that we love God for who he is, rather than what we are getting out of him, is to be in a condition where serving God gives you nothing. In fact, you're getting the very opposite. When bad things are happening to you, you do not even know the reason you are suffering. Avoid moralism, avoid cynicism, because those will not give you answers. God is telling Satan, I can create free lovers, people who love me not for the things they have, not for the things I give to them, but for the very fact that I am God. You and I must learn to embrace the mystery of suffering without even knowing or even expecting to know why. God speaks to Job. Job's suffering is put in first in the perspective of eternity. Some of the questions God asks Job are very interesting. He asks Job, where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me. And then in chapter 8 from verse 37, all the way from verse 1 to 7, he talks about the earth. And then he talks about the oceans. And then he talks about the galaxies. And then in chapter 41, he begins to talk about creation. He talks about the animals. He tells Job, hey, when the goats are giving birth in the mountains, do you know? He's telling him, Job, I know when the goats are giving birth in the mountains. He talks about the wild animals and the domestic animals. He says, who makes the wild animal wild? He asks Job. And who makes the domestic animal domestic? And he asks him, can you do that? You see, when you and I are suffering, we look at one thing that we are suffering. But it's as a result of millions of things that are happening. And this God who is with us is able to sustain all those things. How can he not sustain us in just one or two things that is happening? There is an eternity past, God is telling Job. And then from that eternity, there is a human history. And in that human history, there is a micro level where you and I appear. And in that level where you and I appear, there's a micro times a million of suffering. And God is telling us to look at this as suffering in perspective. But then he also looks at the future. Job in chapter 19 verse 25 says, I know my Redeemer lives, and that in the end he will stand on earth. And after my skin has been destroyed, yet in my flesh I will see God. I myself will see him with my own eyes. I and not another. How my heart yearns within me. Job begins to see a future eternity. You see, in the Garden of Eden, Satan approached man, Adam, and he told him, God does not really love you. This relationship between you and God is using you. Why don't you go and eat the fruit so that you can become like him? He's using you. See, when Satan says bad things to God about us, like he did Job, even though they may be right, God does not accept it, and he does not buy it. But when Satan says bad things to us about God, and there is no truth in them, and he tells us God does not love us, like he did in Genesis, we believe him. The lie of Satan today is this: if you give yourself utterly and wholly to God and trust him, God will crush you. You will not be happy. You can't trust him. He does not love you. And the reason we think the worst of God when bad things come or bad news come is because the lie has sunk so deep in us that God doesn't love us. And the biggest thing we need to know, the biggest proof we need to know, is that centuries later after Job's situation, Satan assaulted another innocent sufferer who died naked and died crying out, why am I suffering? And he got no answer. That was God the Son. You see, when Job was naked, he tore his own robes, he tore his own clothes. But for this Redeemer, because of our sin, we tore his clothes and left him totally naked, hanging up there. Shame on him for being naked. But he was taking our shame. When the case of Job, when Job was feeling abandoned by God, when Pastor Martin was feeling abandoned by God in that forest, God had only allowed Satan to take his assets and even sometimes his family, but he never allowed Satan to touch his life. But for this innocent sufferer, this Redeemer, his life was taken for us. Yes, Job was not truly abandoned, but Jesus was abandoned for our sake. That is the proof, my brothers and sisters, that God loves us. The story of Genesis of God does not love you is a lie. You and I can stand tall and firm, just like the worship team sang. We can see the love of God all around us. Because that is the ultimate love. He died and suffered so that we will not only suffer, but that when we suffer, we will become like him. My brothers and sisters, I want to just conclude by talking about relationships. You know, when Joseph was born, Joseph, the son of Jacob, was born, he found himself in a very interesting relationship. It was a polygamous family. He was born in there. It was of no fault of his own. Jacob's uncle had cheated him and given him a wife he didn't love. Joseph is born of the woman that Jacob loved. There's a toxic relationship in that family. They sell Joseph. He suffers. And then in the end, when all is said and done, Joseph begins to see that although they meant evil, God meant good. And God is very interesting in this passage. Before he restores Job, he tells Job, go and restore your relationships. Now, I do not advocate people going, especially in an abusive relationship, going back to your abuser. But you can pray for them. And I think that's why the Lord's Prayer says, forgive us our debts as we forgive those, or forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. Job says, I had only heard of you, talking about God. But now that I've gone through this process, I have seen you. I don't know about your life. I don't know where you were in January with God. But if you're still at the same place, there's a problem. Because God takes us through processes that we may know him more, that we may see him, that we may feel him. Somebody asked me the other day, what is the most difficult thing about being a pastor? I told him the suffering of God's people. People come here, they have lost jobs. People come here, they have lost loved ones. People come here, their children have gone rebellious. But through that suffering, God allows us to begin to see him as opposed to just hearing about him. It is a process of growth. I wish I could read more scriptures that just show us that our suffering builds us up and refines us. Just like coal is refined under pressure and becomes diamond. Think about the lady Hagar, when she was in the desert and she had reached the end of herself and she had put her son there to die. And then God comes and tells her there's water there. She couldn't even see that water. But then she says, the God who sees, I have seen the God who sees me. And I want to tell anyone in this congregation that maybe you're suffering, the God who sees you has seen you. And I pray that you will see him and not be destroyed by suffering. How is your life today? How is your suffering today? Will it break you or will it build you up? Allow me to close with a story from Indiana in the U.S. A lady called Bill Kay. She was a high school junior. And in their class, they were given an assignment. And they were told, state how you would spend your last week if you knew that that would be your last week of life. And so she wrote the essay. She was a godly girl, a student. And she said, today I live. 1 week from now, I die. And as I regain my composure, on the first day, I will see my loved ones. And I will ask God for guidance. On the second day, I will spend that day early in the morning enjoying the sun rising like I've never done before. I'll visit my family and friends just to say thank you to them. The third day, I will travel to the wood, allowing God's creation to surround me. On the fourth day, I will prepare my will. I'll leave all my sentimental belongings to my friends and to my family. I'll also spend time with my mother and express my gratitude to her, just to tell her how I've appreciated how she's looked after me, all the sacrifices she's made. On the fifth day, I'll spend my time with my pastor, and I'll speak to him about life with Christ. And then on that very same day, I will visit those who are sick, who are ill, knowing that though I know no pain, yet I know my destiny. On the sixth day, I'll visit a very special friend who is going through a broken family situation. On the seventh day, I'll spend time with my grandparents, and spend time in prayer and at peace knowing that God is by my side because of Christ. And then on the final day, which is the day God will come for me, I'll spend my last hour in worship and in praise in perfect harmony with my Lord Jesus Christ, hoping that my life had influenced others. 1 week almost to the day after she wrote this letter, Bill was ushered into the Lord's presence after a road accident, a car road accident. My brothers and sisters, what would you do if you only had a week? Watch the worship team as they come up. And as they come up, may the Lord help us to live our lives in perspective and with urgency, knowing that the suffering we may be going through or will ever go through is but a dot, a micro in the life that God has given us. May God give us new perspective in this vapor called life. May He remember and may we remember our ultimate call and love. May we remember our Redeemer, that we may live with ultimate glory, that we may witness. If Satan cheated Adam and Adam fell for it, and now God has opened a door that our future we may not live in a state of theft, murder, and destruction. And Satan wants all of us to be able to spend hell with him. But Christ has opened the door. How can you fall for that again? That you spend your eternity with Satan in hell. It was not meant for you. How can you spend your whole life regretting about relationships that are toxic? People want to destroy you. God is saying forgive. As the worship team sings, some of you who are here, I'll just give you a chance. You may want to stand up and just pray to God. Because the reality is this. Every day we walk, we are always faced with danger. But God protects us. He never tells us why He's protecting us. But once in a while, He will allow trouble for us to know how much He's protected us from. And some of you may just want to stand up and tell God, thank you for the way you've protected me through the year. Thank you for the way you've protected me through my family through the year. Some of you may be going through some suffering and you just want to dedicate yourself to God like Job did in a lament. But some of you may not know Christ. Don't go away that you may spend your eternity with a thief, a murderer, and a destroyer. As we take time to just pray, feel free to stand up as the worship team leads us at this particular time. Just pray for yourself wherever you are. And if later on you'll want someone to pray with you, some of our pastors will be up here and they will be able to pray for you. Some of our counselors will be up here to just pray for you as we walk this journey. Thank you for your patience. Let's just take time to pray as we listen to this song.
Rescued my soul. His blood has covered my sins. I believe. His shame is taken away, and my pain is healed in His name. I believe. I'll raise a banner, say, I'll raise a banner. Oh, my Lord has conquered the grave. My Redeemer lives. My Redeemer lives. My Redeemer lives. My Redeemer. We thank you, Lord, for that word. We thank you for those who are going through a hard time. You are a God who sees those who see you see. Look upon us with favor, with mercy, and with grace. Lord, whatever each and every one of us is going through, we pray, oh God, that you'll give us the strength to finish that season and to learn what we need to learn in that season and in that time. We give you glory and we give you praise. In Jesus' name we pray, trusting and believing. And the church said, Amen. As the